Yeah, but that's US morning show.
Right.
Welcome to CNN Talk. A small subject today, Brian. China trade war, Iran tensions, what is Trump's goal? But there's a sense of, I mean, when they talk about trade war, and there's more talk about an Iran war, which a lot of academics are saying is very unlikely, but it's this sense of tension.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of saber rattling, and I add to that Venezuela and North Korea, right? So we have four very dangerous theaters in foreign policy right now. I think in one of the columns I wrote right after the 2018 election said that, look, Trump is now going to be blocked on domestic policy because the House is in the Democrats' hands. The president has a lot of latitude in foreign policy, and he's going to distract, and he's going to also potentially be very reckless there, and that's, I think, what we're seeing right now.
100% correct.
I think it's one of these things. He just enjoys acting and seeing the reaction, too. I think he loves thinking, if I pull this lever, then this happens and everybody freaks out.
Yeah.
I think it's that base with him. He just likes to be seen to be...
But with real consequences,
Yeah,
right? I mean, that's the
course.
thing. Is the trade war, the market went down over 600 points yesterday.
Yeah. But then it's going to bounce back up. The futures are saying that's... So is
Oh,
that
And
financial
he'll claim
markets
victory
thing?
again.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this is one of those things where there might be fluctuations, but if the trade war lasts, it will be very
disaster.
damaging to the U.S. economy. It's not going to be about ups and downs. It's going to be downs over the long run.
And people and farmers are already saying, the ones who dare to speak, that the soybean situation for them is like not funny, and they want to know what he's going to do. Someone came on CNN yesterday and just said, look, I'm losing money. What am I going to do? It's okay to get subsidies because he subsidized before. He did farmers' welfare. But these people are proud people. They're not there to get handouts. They want to sell their wares. And Trump, and I don't even know if he believes this. This is the part that's spooky. Trump actually thinks, or he says he thinks, or he says he believes, that a tariff is something somebody else pays for, and we don't pay. I mean, it's just, I don't know if he actually believes that. I'm not really sure.
There's a lot of sympathy, though, for the view that China needs to be reined in a bit in terms of trade. When you look at the amount it's exporting as opposed to importing.
Yeah, and this is Trump's great gift. I think he's very good at identifying the problems and things that need to be addressed, and then he goes about addressing it in completely the wrong way. And yes, China was supposed to look more like the world when it joined the WTO in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it has not. It has stayed on its own course, and Trump is right, and which is why he has tremendous bipartisan support. You know, you'll find Chuck Schumer behind him 100%, and I think it's about the only issue the two men agree on.
In terms of Iran, what are you concerned about there? Because all this, you know, we were talking on the show yesterday about how it could happen by accident.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of reason to worry about miscalculation, blundering into war. The New York Times reporting today that there's...
Welcome to CNN Talk. There are tensions between the US and Iran. There are tensions between China and the US. Talk of war on both fronts, an economic one, but also a military one potentially. What is Trump's goal with all of this?
The U.S. president is defending his trade war tactics as Beijing retaliates and Wall Street tanks.
On Monday, China called Donald Trump's bluff.
China says on June the 1st, it will slap new tariffs on $60 billion worth of U.S. imports. The president said it's going to be a good thing for America.
We're taking in right now hundreds of billions of dollars. We're taking in billions of dollars of tariffs.
His top economic advisor admitted that is not the case.
The president is playing footsie with China while America's farmers are on the losing end of the stick.
Tension also simmering between Iran and the United States.
Saudi Arabia say 4 commercial ships were attacked on Sunday near the Emirati port of Fujairah.
Just days after U.S. officials raised concerns of an Iranian or Iranian proxy attack on shipping in the area.
Well, the top U.S. diplomat will have lots to talk about when he meets Russian President Vladimir Putin in the coming hours, but Iran might top the agenda.
We'll see what happens with Iran. If they do anything, it will be a very bad mistake.
It's a recipe for self-destruction, says Asegbu on Facebook. Laura says Trump is righting the ship, though. And David says Trump's goal is to create a diversion, distract, wag the dog. We welcome our listeners as well on Apple Podcasts. We can tell you also that Donald Trump has just tweeted. It's that time of day, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
We can make a deal with China tomorrow before their companies start leaving. So as not to lose USA business. But the last time we were close, they wanted to renegotiate the deal. No way. We are in a much better position now than any deal we could have made. We'll be taking in billions of dollars and moving jobs back to the USA where they belong. Other countries are already negotiating with us because they don't want this to happen to them. They must be part of USA action. This should have been done by our leaders many years ago. Enjoy, Brian.
Most of that tweet is completely factually wrong.
It's called lies.
I mean, look, taking in billions of dollars, a tariff is a tax on Americans. The importers pay the tariff in America and then pass on the bill to consumers. The billions coming in are via Americans. So he's lying about that. He has repeatedly. He's been corrected. He still says it. Even his own economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, on Fox News on Sunday said, yes, that is exactly how tariffs work. Anyone who would take Economics 101 knows how tariffs work. So in addition to that, the jobs aspects, I mean, most forecasts from industries say that if the trade war continues, hundreds of thousands of jobs will be lost. And the most important thing, I think, for Trump is to understand that he's hurting his own base. He aimed at China with the trade war and hit his base by accident. The soybean industry, for example, 8 of the top 10 states that create soybeans are Trump territory, right? And one of them, Minnesota, where I'm from, is really hurting from this because they sell soybeans to China, which are now not being bought, and they're spoiling.
I mean, if we look at this, Bonnie's, I'm just losing
your things.
Earpiece.
Yes.
China is actually running out of options when it comes to tariffing US goods. And actually, the US is in a much stronger position because if you look at the way the trade flows, it's much more in America's favor. So whilst China can battle America on trade, actually, US can do a lot more damage to China, can't it?
No, because actually, yes, that's true. Those numbers are absolutely right. But as I said before at our talk table, China's playing a long game. They're hurting now, but they're playing a very long game with the United States of America. Trump has got maybe 2 years, maybe he's got another 4. He'll be out of there. China will continue what they're doing unless they're brought to the table, unless they're brought into an environment in which they can understand and cooperate with us. They are wrong. They are wrong, as Brian says. They are wrong. But Trump's goal is short-term, and it's toward the election, and he's lying. See, this is the other part that's horrible, and we have to put on this table. He's hurting his own base. He's taking money, he's giving them welfare in order to prop them up and making them understand or believe that a tariff is not going to hurt them. It's not true.
It's interesting, this long-termism view, Andrew. I'm just going to show you this because this is from the Global Times editor. The sooner new tariffs on Chinese goods come, the better. That means a trade war comes to the first turning point, shifting from a comprehensive US offensive to a stalemate. The two sides will then compete on endurance, and China's political system will ensure they won't lose. China won't lose because they can play the long game, unlike a democracy like
Yeah, and this is one of the things, if you're the U.S. president and you're trying to affect change in China, you have to look at what are the tools and what are the outcomes I want. And if your outcome is a rebalancing of the trade relationship, your issue probably isn't tariff-focused. It's more on other longer-term threats like, ripping intellectual property and getting the Chinese to behave by global rules and kind of ripping up the global trade rule book or importing tariffs or tariffs on things like steel and aluminum with national security connotations around that isn't the way to do it. But again, Trump's audience isn't, or his intellectual audience isn't that crowd. It is showing the little guy that he's doing something on their behalf, even if it hits his own side
Absolutely.
Squarely where it hurts. This is something very simple. They're not playing by the rules. I'm going to hurt them for it. That's a very simple message to get across. And the pointy heads like us can sit here and go, well, that's actually not technically correct, Mr. President. But again, the underlying sentiment feels right. And the president's rhetoric on top of that sentiment feels good to a lot of people.
But at some point, the sentiment doesn't matter if their pocketbooks are getting hurt, right? And I think, so I spoke to the president of the Minnesota Farmers Union recently, and he said, look, we are getting hammered by this trade war. Our people are getting put out of business, particularly small and family farms who can't weather this. And even if they get some sort of subsidy, they have built up foreign markets for soybeans for decades. And those markets are going to go away, right? They're going to find somewhere else to buy them from. And this is a temporary subsidy. So they might end up in the long term being very badly hurt by this. And they're getting squeezed on the other end by the aluminum and steel tariffs because when they buy tractors, they're more expensive. So, this actual effect on the economics of ordinary people is not something where it's about how it looks or how it feels. It's about the actual raw economics, and there's only so long that they can weather this.
And is that past 2020 is the only metric in Trump's mind.
But that's
true.
But that's okay for us to say that, but that's not what we should be focusing on. We do know that it's about 2020. We do know it's about the local news. We do know all of that.
But how does this tension help Donald Trump going into the election?
It helps him because Donald Trump is a chaos merchant. This is what he does. Now, if we don't actually say that and then begin to talk about it from that point of view, we're going to constantly be bucking our heads up against the wall thinking, what is this guy doing? Trump's job is chaos. He doesn't even have a cabinet. This guy's got an acting defense secretary. He's got an acting this. He's got an acting that. That's what he wants because they don't have to stand up in front of the Senate and get confirmed. These are the things that are dangerous. We also could fall into, accidentally, I hope not, a conflict with Iran in the Straits of Hormuz, which would be a nightmare of major proportions.
Well, Susan says, on Facebook says his goal is to provoke North Korea and Iran. He doesn't really want a war with either of them, does he?
Of course he does.
No, he wants to build beautiful condos in North Korea, and somebody should get Trump a perspective of the Iranian coast, because I think that might temper his
But the rhetoric
aggression.
is one thing, but an actual war is quite another.
He'd love a war.
No, I mean, I think he just wants to blow the doors off, kind of thing, and to be seen to be disturbing
I think that's a war. That's called war.
Well, that's how wars start,
That's
right?
called war.
What would happen if there were going to be a war with Iran? There would be saber-rattling back and forth, and one commander on one ship of the Iranian Guard would accidentally go a little too far.
Peasy.
All of a sudden, there's a conflict, and then neither side can save face without actually going into an actual battle or using cyber weapons or something like that. And John Bolton, who is Trump's national security advisor, has written repeatedly that he wants to bomb Iran.
He made a song. He sung about it. He sung about it. Bomb, bomb, bomb Iran.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
literally
John McCain.
sung about it.
That was John McCain, was it?
No. That was John.
Well, John Bolton has written in 2015. Either way, he wrote an
That's his
op-ed
narrative.
where he said we should bomb Iran.
Exactly.
And I think this is a very realistic possibility that this saber rattling could spin out of control.
And we have precedent there where the U.S. shot an airliner out of the air about 30 years ago that almost triggered a...
This is what the New York Times has got. The White House reviews military plans against Iran in echoes of the Iraq War.
And Trump is very, and I hate using this reference, but Trump is very capable of doing a Reichstag fire thing in order to get what he needs to happen, i.e., this sort of incident that was supposed to have happened on a ship. Nobody knows what it's about. Nobody knows what the ship was, wherever.
You're talking about these ships in Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, they don't
which
even know
were
what this
attacked.
was. Okay, Trump, and I'm using the Reichstag fire as an analogy to talk about how Trump could actually get a tiny little war going before 2020.
Iranians are condemning what happened here as well. What do you think happened there? Because Iranians suggesting that perhaps it was the other side making it look like it was Iran.
Well, I mean, look, I think we have to be very careful about insinuating things when you don't have evidence about them. And this one is one where I don't have any evidence to the contrary. So what this does tell us, which I absolutely can say, is that this is the type of event that misinterpretations of what happened can lead to war. And we do have, I mean, Bonnie's right about the acting Secretary of Defense, who, by the way, is a former Boeing executive, a major weapons contractor, who, he put together this proposal to send 120,000 troops to the Middle East, up to 120,000 troops, which is the same number from the Iraq War. That's broke overnight. John Bolton is behind this, who has, constantly advocated a war in Iran. And I think this is something where you can imagine it spinning out of control, despite the fact that neither side has an interest in war. And that's how a lot of wars start. I mean, the Iraq War, the first one, the Gulf War, happened when Saddam Hussein mistakenly thought that he could invade Kuwait without a response. And then the war happened, right? I mean, you have two sides that are trying to figure out what the other one is playing at, and trying to figure out Trump is very difficult. So the Iranians might make a mistake.
Let's hear from Trump on Iran from Monday night.
Dear.
We'll see what happens with Iran. If they do anything, it will be a very bad mistake. If they do anything, I'm hearing little stories about Iran. If they do anything, they will suffer greatly. We'll see what happens with Iran.
Is that war talk?
Well, that sounds like what he said with North Korea. The fire and fury, like the world is not seen, and that again is a dangerous world to be living in here. And the other thing that Trump, he's a very binary guy, and obviously the situation in Iran is not as clear cut as he would like it to be. There is a set of reformists there against a hard line. They are trying to punish the hard line, but in doing that, they catch the reformists in the crossfire. And the grand irony about Iran is it was the one population in that part of the world that was not reflexively anti-American, the people, because they blamed their government for the situation. But that's in danger now of being lost. And we now have the situation where Obama, agree or disagree with his plan, it was the best of a bad set of options in my view, but at least he took the stance of trying to buttress the reformists there against the hardliners. And Trump's just content to throw that out the window. Maybe there'll be a war, maybe there won't be. You know, and that's a lot of diplomatic effort just to throw away on a whim because the president doesn't like what Obama achieved.
And Seema on Facebook says he's just trying to keep America safe and prosperous.
Yeah, right. Well, America happens to exist in the world. It doesn't exist in Donald Trump's golden cage on Fifth Avenue. It exists in the world. Donald Trump is intent on destabilizing Iran because it's an easy narrative in the United States. It's cheap, nasty, and easy. So if he can keep Iran as the bad guys, after he's practically destabilized his government, what I think both of you are saying, and I really feel, is that there's a thing called national machismo. And there's a point where a nation is saying, I'm sick of being pushed around. I'm not going to take this anymore. Iran might get to the point, they've already gotten their economy practically wrecked by this guy. It might get to the point where they might have to put their dukes up, and that's really bad news. And we need to stop, and I don't say we're doing it, but we need to stop normalizing Donald Trump's actions, trying to put them into some sort of shape that makes sense. We have to admit they don't make sense, and then move from there.
Well, I think they make sense, though. I think if you look at his first foreign visit as a president was to Saudi Arabia, if you look at one other country in that region that would like to see Iran hem backed because of their actions, both in Yemen or around the Crescent into Syria and Lebanon, you know, you have the Israelis and the Saudis that are both on side with the U.S. So I wouldn't say there isn't any chess going on here. Donald Trump has been pretty consistent in taking the Saudi-Sunni side against the Shia Persian side in this area.
Trump thinks this will win him re-election. I mean, how much is this about getting the Jewish sort of pro-Israeli vote in the United States?
Well, I mean, in terms of his electoral prospects, I think that this actually could backfire in a major way because it's a very, very complicated and very fraught situation. I think beyond that, I mean, I think we should say the Iranian regime is terrible, right? I mean, it's an authoritarian and brutal and an awful regime. The Chinese on trade are not playing by the rules. Both of these things are true. There are smarter options for how to deal with them. I mean, as the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran, even Trump's own advisor said this was working at preventing them from getting a nuclear bomb. It was slowly hemming the Iranian regime in. On trade with China, there was the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which could have actually isolated China with a very powerful block of trade around it. And now instead, it's going without the U.S. because Donald Trump removed the U.S. from it. And China might eventually become the major player in that trade deal. So this isn't to say that he's wrong that these are major threats. They absolutely are. They need to be dealt with. But it's to say there are smarter and stupider ways to deal with them. And the current approach is, I worry, very, very risky. And it may, you know, maybe it pays off. Great. But at what cost? At what risk? Are we willing to roll the dice with another war in the Middle East with a massive geopolitical standoff with China? I mean, I don't think so.
To your point that they're acting very unilaterally, are they? This is a map that we put together of Pompeo's visits just since the 5th of May. He's been shuttle diplomacy, can we call it that?
Jumping off of planes.
But travelling to Brussels, for example, and then over to Sochi today to try to get some sort of agreement on Iran, global agreement. So it's not just in U.S. interests. It's
it is in the U.S. interest. These are players who have to position themselves in relation to the United States. They all have to do that. How are you positioned in relation to the United States of America? And this is basically what Pompeo lays on the table. Are you with us? Are you against us? It's not, I'm listening to you. What's your point of view? That's not how Donald Trump runs. The other thing I would caution about being careful about the Jewish vote. The Jewish vote is as diverse as anything else. It's about who Trump listens to and pays attention to, who helps him. Though there's a segment that is really for Trump and wants to see Iran destroyed. It's a small percentage of people, but they do exist, and it's who he listens to because they help him.
But he does know his sort of market metrics, doesn't he? This is the sort of stuff he studies endlessly. He wouldn't just be targeting a very narrow group, would he?
No. I think he's got a very, like as you said, an innate sense of who votes for him and why. And I think this will be much like the Canada-Mexico trade negotiations. There's a lot of tension, drama, blah, 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 I'm fighting for you. And then suddenly you get a deal that doesn't really look that much different than the original. In fact, it's just a little bit worse. But he can say, look, I promised that I would do that. I've done it. It's on the table. I think with China, he's looking for an off-ramp. You know, he did this last minute, you know, take the settings off the table because the Chinese had backed away. I think eventually they will come back together just so he can say, look, I took them on. First president to do that in 30 years. And I reset the table. And again, it'll probably look a lot like it does now with some collateral damage to farmers along the way. But he will be able to say, I did this. And that, as you're coming up to re-election, he just needs one or two things.
And it wouldn't have bitten by then, would it?
You have to see who runs this, because the market, when Trump did his initially, the market sort of waited because he backs down on things. When China stepped in, it took a dive.
We can show you what
and
happens.
that's what it's about.
Yeah, this is what happened. You can see, you know, that dip. That was yesterday, although the markets are looking up today.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is obviously a reaction to the prospect that this could be a lengthy trade war. I think one of the things that's interesting when we talk about Trump is sort of this idea that he wouldn't have done it if there hadn't been a grand strategy. But like the last 2.5 years don't suggest that that's actually true. He's the least popular president in American history in terms of average polling numbers. If he wanted to build his base for re-election, he would have focused on independents, who he's been bleeding very badly. And if he wanted to go for re-election, he would actually get a deal across rather than having this sort of chaos that's happening without any actual deals. I mean, the world's greatest deal maker, like he sold himself. I mean, the U.S.-Mexico trade agreement is basically the only deal he's gotten over the line, and it hasn't even been ratified. Congress, right? Yep. So, like, after 2.5 years, this sort of narrative of Trump hasn't, the proof is in the pudding, and he hasn't really shown the proof yet.
Lucian on Facebook says, Trump's only goal is to be famous. He's definitely achieved that.
Well, he's already done that.
We're going to come back after the break.
That's all he's ever wanted. And the most powerful. He wants to be very powerful.
That is the one metric that.
Yeah, he wants to be
we
very
can all agree
powerful.
on.
Yeah. He wants to be very
powerful. There's a weird thing that happens in sort of academic looking at, academic takes on foreign policy, because they're always about like what is in the core national interest, what is in like trade interests, and something that's like, with Trump, there's some aspects of narcissism that are in play for sure. There's some aspects of his business.
How about malignant narcissism?
But there's things that are driving U.S. foreign policy that like the models do not account for right now, right? Like they don't explain.
Exactly.
If you try to say like why is he helping Duterte in the Philippines, and it's like, well, there's a Trump Tower in Manila. There's no model that says that, right? It's all about realism or liberalism.
And to go back to what you were saying about his poll numbers and conventional models. You're right. If you look at his poll numbers, this is nobody who's going to expect to be elected president of the United States. They are the worst that ever existed, ever, ever, ever. And I'm talking about Truman, right after he became president, after FDR died. They're even worse than his, worse than Nixon's, worse than anybody's. But I think what Trump has done is he's changed the game in many ways. Why he's afraid of Biden and why Biden is ahead is because people want to get rid of him, and they see Biden as the only person. They don't care about issues anymore. Trump has taken issues off the table. It's about him.
Welcome back to CNN Talk. We're talking about the China trade war, also the Iran tensions, and what Donald Trump hopes to get out of all of this. In terms of the trade war, adding tariffs to incoming Chinese goods would actually add billions to America's funds, effectively. Take a listen.
We're dealing with them. We have a very good relationship. Maybe something will happen. We're going to be meeting, as you know, at the G20 in Japan. And that'll be, I think, probably a very fruitful meeting. But we're taking in right now hundreds of billions of dollars. We're taking in billions of dollars of tariffs. And those tariffs are going to be tremendously, if you look at what we've done thus far with China, we've never taken in 10 cents until I got elected. Now we're taking in billions and billions.
Not entirely accurate, Andrew, but you've been involved in trade negotiations, haven't you, for Canada?
No, I picture Stephen Harper saying those words. I think, A, he wouldn't because he has a brain.
There's a lot of this that goes on. It's still got a couple of weeks until the tariffs kick in, so we're still in that area of negotiation anyway.
He's only able, as Brian pointed out earlier, to say these things now because it hasn't quite hit the broader pocketbook. The people that are in the industries that are affected are feeling the pain, but unless it costs me more to fill up at the gas tank, unless it costs me more to buy my staples when I go to shopping for my food, that's when it kicks in, becomes a pocketbook, tabletop conversation around the dinner table. that's when it will bite. And I think we're still a long way from that yet. And if he cobbles together at the G20 some degraded version of what he was hoping to achieve, he'll still dress it up, call it a win, and sell it as such.
He's listening as well, because he's just tweeted again about China.
Oh, Trumpy.
When the time is right, we will make a deal with China. My respect and friendship with President Xi is unlimited. But, as I've told him many times before, this must be a great deal for the United States, or it just doesn't make sense.
Well, he doesn't make sense. I mean, he puts his feet up on the table and thinks he can do things on his stupid phone, which is what he does, and with his thumbs.
I just think the Chinese wake. I just think they wake up and laugh. You know, if you're
Well,
in the
they have to
MFA
be
in China
laughing.
and read
It's
that, you go,
outrageous.
oh, okay, tough guy.
Yeah.
But you know, the scary part is, and I think the part that matters for us, is an accident in the Straits. That's what I worry about. I worry about Iran just saying we're fed up, we've had it, this is enough. I don't know if it's going to happen. I hope it doesn't. But that's what worries me.
And the Economist suggesting such a thing as well. Collision course, America, Iran, and the threat of war, suggesting it could actually, as you said, happen by accident out of all of this rhetoric.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the things that a lot of experts on Iran's regime will say, too, is that this could also come in the form of a cyber attack. There have been examples where Iran has gotten very good at this. The U.S., of course, has very sophisticated capabilities, too. But one of the things that I think is worrisome is what happens if there's a cyber attack in the next 6 months. We're going to have to wonder, is it Iran? Is it not? Is there going to be a war that responds to this? All
Which
of
is
this
what's
stuff
happened in the Straits of Hormuz.
It's exactly why it's so dangerous, because when you have this sort of reckless ratcheting up of rhetoric, you have something where all of this doesn't allow the leaders in both countries to save face, to sort of say, let's cool down, let's figure out a deal, and let's not end up in war. Because the 120,000 number of troops, that's the upper limit of this proposed plan to send soldiers to Iran or to the Middle East. I mean, it would be much worse than the Iraq War. It's a much more serious and much more dangerous conflict. And the Iraq War is still having effects on the American economy, on American foreign policy. So, I mean, I think when we talk about this, even if it's a 5% risk, the catastrophe that would come with a war is so great that we can't ignore that. And I think that's why the sort of people who speak to Donald Trump, I would hope that they'll rein him in.
We're hearing now that 2 oil pumping stations in Saudi Arabia were attacked by armed drones on Tuesday. That's according to the state media. So again, playing into
Saudi
the
Arabia's state media
narrative. Yeah.
Yes, and this again, the greater conflict in the area between Sunni-backed Saudi Arabia and their allies against Shia Iran and its proxies around the world, and they've been looking for a reason to kick this off. And it used to be a balance of greater powers on top of that would neutralize it, but now with the states kind of looking all over the world and pursuing its own interest, America first, and a Russia that is showing it's going to be willing to be quite aggressive, we could be in a very dangerous
We're just going to take you to Sochi because Mike Pompeo, currently getting off the plane in Sochi, he's going to meet his counterpart, Lavrov, but also Russian President Vladimir Putin, and they have diametrically opposing views on Iran.
I hope he tells them to stop messing in U.S. elections, too. I doubt that's going to be on the table.
What can come out of the meeting?
Well, showbiz. You know, show up, be there, show that you're doing some kind of shuttle diplomacy, and then let it all kick off. Donald Trump has no concept, and I think as what Andrew and Brian is saying, he doesn't actually have any concept of what he's setting off in the world. It's very difficult for us to have any kind of rational conversation about an irrational agent. And that is what this man is. He's got 2 wars going. He's got a trade war, and he might even have a hot war. Plus, he's playing a 4th of July parade, which is going to have a military war. I mean, it's just at the point where...
He doesn't care because the impact won't be felt until after 2020, says Chantal.
Oh, it'll happen now.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible. The miscalculation, I mean, the nature of it is that you can't predict it. So...
And then you have to deal with the repercussions?
I don't think that if there actually were a war in Iran, I think it would be catastrophic for his re-election and catastrophic for America and the world. I also think, when Pompeo is off to do this diplomacy, it's important to note that the U.S. is the most powerful country in the world, but it's much more powerful when it's with its allies. And right now, the Iran nuclear deal was the thing that the U.S. forged with Europe. And now the U.S. is trying to do it alone. It's going to be much less effective without its allies.
Pompeo did snub Merkel.
Absolutely.
Kwame on Facebook saying you can't defeat Iran with missiles and airstrikes. It's not Iraq. Making that point, which is true.
Of course
they didn't really defeat Iraq.
No, they didn't defeat Iraq either.
It didn't go super well either.
It's not the point. It's showing his muscle as a person, a man, and the country's muscle.
And it's more, do U.S. allies then come under the wing? Does Netanyahu do the business that he's wanted to do against the proxies that he's facing in places like Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, and Syria? Does that give him license to ask?
His goal is putting America first, says Michael, which is what he should be doing as the American president.
Yeah, where's Michael from?
Michael Coe, I don't know, have a guess.
Well, I guess Florida.
No, but I think America first. If we're actually being honest about what America first has meant in hardcore policy, it has been America alone. It has been unilateral disengagement from multilateral treaties.
Isn't that the same as America first?
No, it's not, because it's the actual interests of the United States have not been served by this.
Exactly. Yes.
I mean, this is the difference, right? I mean, the reason this Iran talk and the saber rattling has to happen is because a nuclear deal that all of Trump's advisors said was accomplishing the goal it set out to stop Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, has now been torpedoed. And now there's a real risk of Iran disengaging too, because the U.S. has, and that's spiraling into conflict. That's not something that's in America's interest. And I would put it very strongly that people who voted for Trump in the heartland, who wanted Trump to disengage from the Middle East, are not going to be happy if there are 120,000 troops.
But it's going to be too late for them. You're absolutely right. It's going to be too late. Donald Trump controls them.
Jason says, when Trump stands up for America, it's called racist. Let him clean up this mess. Claude says this will end up with war. Linda says never underestimate China. You can have your say on our Facebook feed. Just stop squirming.